also viewing the recording after the event as well. So very pleased to have this audience across, as I say, a different set of platforms and also here today. So in this series, we hear from new and newly appointed professors in AMBS who are delivering their inaugural lectures. Wing was promoted to professorship last summer, and this webinar is an opportunity for us in the business school to celebrate her success. And as many of you will know, I do attach a lot of importance to people celebrating their success, all of us celebrating our success. Academia can be a treadmill where we just go from one thing to the next, and it is very important to stop and smell the roses. So it is very nice to see people here today and, as I say, online supporting Wing, as well as especially her husband and daughter. We're very pleased to welcome you here, and as I say, the online audience from right across the globe. So thank you all for coming and joining us today. So Wing joined AMBS in 2020. Prior to joining the school, she worked for the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Since she joined us, she is now currently the school postgraduate director, postgraduate research director. She has many examples of external leadership as well, having served and is serving on numerous editorial boards, and is, for example, the associate editor for the Journal of Occupational Psychology and the Journal of Business Research. And indeed, throughout also her career, Wing has attracted competitive research funding worth over £780,000. Wing's research falls into the area of workplace dynamics, focusing primarily on employee proactivity and productivity. Since earning her PhD in 2006, Wing has published her work with high standards for quality, visibility and impact in top outlets and is pushing her field of research forward. Wing's research on proactivity is fascinating. Her lead authored paper about how leaders attribute the motives for employee proactivity is a very interesting and impactful research agenda in the field, leading to extensive numbers of publication citations. Her recent research not only focuses on how and why employees' proactivity affects individual and organisational performance, but also looks at team proactivity and how that affects team effectiveness, which is a novel and her original contribution to a new research topic in organisational psychology. So in today's lecture, Wing is going to be discussing whether proactivity should be viewed as a superpower at work. So that's a very nice turn of phrase, isn't it? I'd like to think we've all got superpowers, and that might be one of them. So, as I say, proactivity continues to be a major research discussion in the field of organisational psychology, with increasing studies on proactive personality, goals and behaviour appearing in top journals in the field since 2000. And scholars and practitioners agreeing that being proactive is distinctive and vital now more than any other time, and especially due to the dynamic nature of the work environment and all the factors that are affecting that, both internal and external to the environment. So there's going to be plenty of time towards the end of today's session for your questions. So people here, of course, in the room can raise their hand in the usual fashion. But for those of you who are online, do please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen as we go through the event. Our colleague Andre here is sitting in the corner, is going to be monitoring all the conversation that's going on our various social media channels, and we'll be able to feed that into the discussion. So the discussion and questions are going to be facilitated by our colleague Hongwei, who's a professor of marketing and school director of social responsibility, who many of you will, of course, already know. So I'm sure we're very keen to get started. So let me hand over to Professor Lam to begin her presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi, well, thank you so much. And well, thank you for all of you, and thank you, Fiona, for your kind introduction. And thank you, Hongwei, and for facilitating the lecture. Thank you all of you for joining today's lecture. And I look forward to have a more interactive discussion with you today. If you have any questions, just feel free to ask. Before we come to the discussion about the topic, proactivity at work, and I would like to say a few things to thank to my family and friends. First, I have to say thank you to my mom and dad, and they're now who is in Hong Kong, and I'm sure that without travel restriction, they must come and join me to celebrate the happy moment with me. So thank you so much for all of them. For them. And secondly, and I would like to say thank you to Zach, my husband, and Vicky, for my daughter, for their support on putting me to giving me the opportunity to develop my career. And for your support is really very, very important for me as a working mom and wife. Thank you so much. And besides that, I would like to give a special thanks to Lancaster University, and I pursued for my master's degree there, and this changed my life. And because of this postgraduate experience, and so I start my academic career in organizational psychology. Besides that, I would like to thank Professor Cynthia Lee from the Northeastern University as my career mentor. And during the journey, and she always gives me a lot of encouragement, and we develop a lot of very interesting ideas to work together happily. Besides that, I also would like to thank Professor Sharon Parker. And I started my PhD with the topic on employees' productivity. But then after my graduation, I lost the direction because my advisor was not in the same area. And so I was trying to search around to see what topic that I'm interested in. And then Professor Sharon Parker, she always encouraging me and work together on some of the project. And so give me a lot of encouragement to continue the journey on proactivities. And then I also would like to thank all of the students and postgraduate students that I've worked together. And so to working with you is a fantastic experience, and for making me to continuously developing myself. And last but not the least is, I would like to give the special thanks to AMBS and as well as the University of Manchester. And so I'm developing my new career in the UK. Thank you so much. And importantly as well, I would also like to thank to myself. And I complete my PhD 3 years on time. It's quite important so that I don't need to pay for the tuition fee. And I feel quite appreciated that I work on the topic on employees' productivity. And personally, I think that this topic is quite aligned with my personal tendency as well as my personal goal. And that's why I developed new ideas about proactivity attribution. And these ideas is that, productivity in this is quite a kind of the risky behavior. And whether it's good or bad, indeed, it all depends on the attribution. To see, how the people, the motive of the attribution. So at that time, I tried to think about that. Indeed, whether the employees would be welcome to do their proactive behavior. Maybe it also depends on how the leader will attribute the motive for their productivity. So I work on this topic, both on my paper submission as well on my thesis. So this is my product, my baby, the first baby, the PhD thesis. Vicky is the second baby. Yeah. Before I come to discuss about the conceptualization of employees' productivities, I would like to share one of my personal experience. And many years ago, my husband and I, we rent a car to drove from Los Angeles to Grand Canyon. And so this is a very amazing journey for us. We relied on the built-in car navigation. It's so exciting for us. at the first beginning, for a few hours, we feel so excited because we can see, wow, we go to the desert, and so a lot of very, very big cactus. I'm so excited to take a lot of the pictures, and then it's really very amazing trip. But then after a few hours, but why we are still in the desert? And so we try to think about if we continue driving this, and then it will become very dangerous for us. And we may lack of petrol, water, food, etc. So we start to think about what can we do? And we're the proactive person. So either we can choose to find a new road, or we have to curse the bumpy road. So what we have to do? And then, as we are the proactive person, we chose the first option. And we try to hear the sound of the vehicle, because we cannot rely on the built-in car navigation, the GPS anymore, because we found that the GPS has not been updated yet. So the road has been abandoned. And so that's why at that time, we don't even have the Google Map, mobile phone, etc. So what should we do is, we can only hear the vehicle sound, and so try to find a new road. So, this is one of the typical examples about proactivity. And so, for the proactive person, we are trying to change the current situation. We understand that, we are in a difficulty, the challenging situation. So that's why, we have to do something to change it, to improve it. So this is the concept of proactivity. And then what it really means to proactive. And some people will say that being proactive is just for a kind of taking the initiative. But indeed, it's more than that. Because think about it. If you have already chosen some of the options to making a decision, you have to recognize that you have to take the responsibility for this decision. So, the proactive people, the proactive agents, who are the ones who don't want to choose to be the victims. We're not to be the victims. Instead of, we're not going to bring others to. So, we have to find some new way in order to change the current situation. Well, in a more theoretical term, if we define the concept of proactivities, there are three major features. Number one is future-oriented. The proactive people is quite future-oriented because, they are anticipating the current and also the future situation. They're trying to think about and evaluate, is there any way to improve? They are quite future-looking and long-term thinking. The second important feature is change-oriented. So the key is to make the improvement for the current situation, is try to overcome the current challenge and to improve the current situation and work context. And number three, which is very different from the extra role behavior or for the organizational citizenship behavior, the extra role. And so, because proactivity is a kind of the self-initiated things. So it means that no one is asking you to do this, is no one is forcing you to do this, or it's not related to any reward system. Instead of, it's really having good heart to try to improve the current situation. So it is self-initiated, self-started. And here's some of the example of employees' proactivity in an organization. And for the majority of the research has been done on the voice behavior. The employees, they have some of the suggestions or to criticize the organization. So they have to voice out, to voice up to the leader, to the team members. So this is the voice behavior. Besides that, getting more and more research has been done on the work redesign or job crafting behavior, especially today, because the employees, they are the knowledgeable worker. They also have the demand and expectation, not only on themselves, but also to the organization, to the team. So, well, what do they do? Sometimes, well, they want to further improve. Sometimes, well, they may not be very, very happy or at work. So in the past, they may choose to leave the organization. But now for the proactive people, and well, they may choose to redesign the job, or even well, to negotiate the job content, job contacts with the supervisor as well. So this is what we call the job crafting behavior. Number 3, and for my PhD work, is also work on feedback seeking. Employees, they may want to know how well or how bad that they perform. So that's why, well, they are seeking feedback from the boss, from the peers, from the subordinates, so that, well, to have a more understanding of their work. So that is the feedback seeking behavior. Besides that, we're also having something like, well, the taking charge. The new members will do some proactive socialization so that to get them attached into the new team, into the organization. Prevent more problem behavior or doing some project issue selling behavior. It will all regard it as proactivity, employees' proactivity in organization. You may ask me, how important is proactivity is really so important to the organization? So the answer is, in general, yes. And a lot of the existing research already confirmed the relationship. Is to confirm that if the employees, well, they perform some proactive behavior to become very proactive in organization, so will lead to a lot of the positive outcome, not only for the individual to increase the salary, to have the promotion, to increase their work performance, etc., but also, well, will be good to the team to build up a more team cohesions, increasing the team creativity, increasing the organization performance, etc., etc. So a lot of the positive outcome. But then, well, you may have a question that, is productivity always good? What is the answer? Well, let's see. And well, some of the researchers in saying that, well, in this somehow, even though productivity is quite good to the organization, to the individual, but at the same time, we may also notice that productivity may, well, challenge the time, mental or energy resources of the employees, because when they're doing some proactive behavior, will increase their work pressure. And well, also increasing their burnout, fatigue, feeling, etc., etc. So what should we do? And for recently, I work with my PhD students and my colleagues on the projects about, well, proactivity recovery. We developed these ideas saying that, well, the employees, of course, well, we hope that they can continue doing the proactive behavior, being so well proactive to help the organization to improve. But at the same time, we also need to take care about their well-being. So we're proposing these new ideas and saying that well, the employees and well, they can have some rest, they can have some off-job experience, recovery experience after work in the evening. And well, they may help in to boost up and continue to become more proactive on the next day. So in this research, we are using the daily sample and well, we try to explore if the employees that they are having some off-job recovery experience. For example, like, well, forget about their job for some while, detachment, and for having a more relaxation, and building up their hobbies, interests, having a more well-organized, well, prioritize their job, manage their job, and reducing the hustles at home. And so, well, we found that this type of the recovery experience really doesn't matter in affecting the work productivities of the employees on the next day. So, well, as the organizations, and well, we also need to take care about, well, the employees' well-being. And well, we build on this research based on the conservation of the resources theory. This theory is telling us that for the employees, well, we try to protect our resources, the energy, the time, well, etc., the resources. And at the same time, when we find we're fatigued, burnout, tired, and so we have to do something to restore our energy. So that's why we're proposing that, well, the off-job experience really doesn't matter in affecting people's work productivity. And that for some other scholars also saying that, well, indeed, productivity may not be so good. Of course, well, it sounds quite good to the team to improve, well, the performance, but at the same time, it may not be always good, especially because, well, if it might threaten the peers, current, or the future resources. As you can see from the first picture, and so the proactive employees, I got a lot of the good example, I got a lot of the good suggestions to the boss. And so well, it seems he really have a very good heart to improve the team, to improve the organization. But then can you see the faces of the members? It doesn't look very happily. And because, well, they may consider that, okay, well, you're fine, well, you're making the suggestions, but then, well, how about us? We as a team. So, well, it's not only you yourself to take into practice, instead of we're working as a team. And for the second picture, it's also showing us that some of the employees, they got a brilliant idea. Well, they can work overtime on a proposal, well, making a very well-organized, well, suggestions to the organization, etc. But again, well, yes, well, they are the high performers, but it doesn't mean that, well, they are really good team players. So when we consider about, well, the employees' productivity issue, at the same time, we also need to care about, well, whether they have, well, understand about others' needs and, well, concerns, the social context. And then we can see that, well, the productivity employees, sometimes we will consider that they're doing too much. They may not, well, care too much about others in the social context. And so, well, some other people may attribute the motive in a more negative way. And we link with my earlier example, well, my PhD thesis is about the attribution on the employees' productivities, in the sense that if the employees, the motive for productivities, well, if the others or supervisor consider that the employees' productivities, well, because they just want to impress their boss, is related to the impression management motive. And then, well, others will consider that their proactive behavior is very manipulating and calculating. So they're very easily to creating a negative feeling on their proactivity. However, if others, the leaders, the peers, will consider that the proactive behavior because just want to help to enhance the organization or the team performance. So usually we'll create a more positive feeling on that because they think that, oh yes, well, you have a good heart. You really want to improve the team. So well, they will take it, they like it. So again, it depends on the attribution. Somehow, good performance is good, and that, well, they can drive the team. They can for creating a lot of the new ideas, very proactive in the team. But then for at the same time, the rest of the group may find that, well, have less of the confidence. They will feel that, well, they are not really very qualified to work with our performer. So that's why, well, it will largely negatively affecting the team culture. And well, for such kind of the proactive behavior, we may not be so welcome, or sometimes even is less gratitude for the proactive agent as well. They think that, well, yes, you're the good performers, you are the proactive person, but if you only were doing that without considering, well, the social context, it may not be so welcome to the team and the leader as well. And well, recently, I also worked with my colleagues on, I think it's quite interesting paper that is about, well, when and why is the right time to voice out? when. And then, well, the idea is that, number one, you have to see whether your peers in a good mood today. If they do, yes, you can voice out, you can make the suggestions, you can criticize. But if you can see that, well, your peers are not in a good mood today, then you have to be very cautious. You have to consider that, well, whether you have a good relationship with them. If not, then I was suggesting that probably you have to be patient. You have to wait for the right time. One day, well, he or she has good mood, and then you can voice it out. Or otherwise, well, probably. And that's why, well, for this research, it's telling us that, well, you have a lot of the ideas to propose or to criticize, but that you have to wait for the appropriate moment. You have to see, well, when or why is the right time to voice out. We talk a lot about, well, the employees' productivity. So you may also have a question that, how about leaders? So the leaders also need proactivity. And especially recently, during the leader transition, and when we got a loss of the leader transition to change the leader joined into the team. And so, well, due to the pandemic or due to, well, the organization lockdown, restructuring, etc. So if the new leader joined into the organization, and so, well, how do they do in order to position themselves in the team? Again, well, is it a matter of the leader proactivity? The answer is somehow yes or no. Yes, because we hope that the leaders can be more proactive to drive the team. But the answer is no, because, well, we also need to consider that, well, whether the recipient, your team member, are proactive or not. So it's a matter of matching congruence. In the past, we just keep asking that, okay, well, you have to be proactive. No matter you're the leader or the other things, well, you have to be proactive. But now we notice that actually, well, we can not only rely on single party. Instead of, we have to see the congruence between different parties. So that's why, as you can see that for the new leader, they're so excited to join in a new team. So they said, hi, folks, I'm so proactive, and well, I've become the team leaders. I have, well, a lot of the agenda in hand, number 1, number 2, number 3. So what happened? You can see, well, the employees, they don't look like very happy. It doesn't mean that, well, they're not proactive, but, well, actually, they may not, well, understand why, well, the leaders suddenly become, well, lots of a different agenda and were so proactive. It's a kind of the matching. As the leader, we also need to sense, well, the climate of the team when they enter into the new team. It's just like, well, in the animal world, the mother duck, and well, if she's so proactive to find the food, to find a home, and so if she swims very quickly, but the baby duck cannot follow, so what's happening? They will lose the baby. So the same situation in the organization, the leader is proactive, is good, but at the same time, they also need to work together with the employees. So this is what we call congruence. Because of that, and then I work with some colleagues, and based on the ideas about, well, contrast effects and congruence, notion of congruence, and then, well, we developed this research project. And this research project, well, is telling us that the matching between the team and the new leaders' proactivity is great. Well, the team, they're very proactive. The leaders, the new leaders, who is very proactive as well, a good matching. So that's why, well, the employees, they will be more identified and likely to work with the new leader. They will also appreciate and identify with the new agenda exchange. But, well, it's not that simple. The idea is that for the team, they may always recall and making comparisons for the contrast effects, well, between the former leader and the new leader's proactivities. We cannot avoid it because, well, the employees themselves, they work with the former leader. They've already got this experience. So that's why they always were making comparison to see whether the new leader is more or less proactive with the previous leaders. So that's why in this research, we found that if the new leader is more proactive than the former leader, and then usually, well, given to the condition that the team is also very proactive and will do work very well. However, if, well, the situation that the former leader is more proactive than the current leader, it means that the new leader is less proactive than the previous leader. And then, well, the employees may not be very happy with that, given that, well, if they are also very proactive, because, well, they will consider that, well, actually, you're not very qualified to be my leader. So that's why, again, it's about, well, the matching issue. It's about, well, whether they match well, very well in the organization. And some of you may also, well, have the question that, well, recently, COVID-19, the situation, the context affecting us a lot. And so, well, in a positive way or negative way, of course, well, we cannot avoid this. This is, well, the external environment. Everyone is being affected by COVID-19. But then, well, whether productivity is a good thing or bad things under this, well, uncontrollable situation. And for some of the research, and will confirm that productivity that's really helping to overcome the challenge during the pandemic period. But then there was some of the research saying that no, actually the employees, they have to mainly focusing on doing the in-role performance. And so they do not have extra effort and time to work on their proactive behavior. So that's why, well, it's really hard to say. And recently, I also worked with a team, and well, we're exploring the ideas that, well, under the pandemic, because, well, the team members, they have a very high level of job insecurity, and rather they should do more or less proactive behavior is also very interesting ideas to explore. So the question now is productivity always good? The answer is, it depends. Depends on what? Depends on a lot of things. Depends on the context, depends on for the social dynamic, depends on the attribution, depends on the way that when you perform the proactive behavior, depends on the time that you do it, etc., etc. So a lot of the when, what, why, well, how, a lot of different issues. And well, we can see that productivity somehow it isn't always good. And we also need to recognize the dark side of productivity. We cannot avoid it. And then we have to think about what the dark side of the productivity. So we're suggesting to employees that, well, proactivity is good, but they have to do it in a more wise way. So this is what we call the wise productivities. It means that, well, they have to do the right things and, well, to do things right. So this is the wise productivities. The last remark for this lecture today, don't just be proactive, but be wisely proactive. All right, so thank you so much.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor Lam. That's truly an amazing lecture. It's very inspiring. And I'm personally very inspired, not just by your proactivity, right? But also by your passion and your contagious passion and contagious smile during the lecture as well. So, and then your passion for research and knowledge. Right. Also, the lecture also gave me the confidence that I think I'm a proactive person, and I believe that being proactive is good as a director for social responsibility, because I can see the proactivity congruence in the SLT of the business school. So Fiona, the head of school is there, so I'm sure she would agree with me. Right. So we are in a very high congruent high-fit, proactive team. But it also makes me realize that actually I could even be more proactive. So probably I'm not and be wisely proactive. So that's and then also, I mean, it's so inspiring that I think I made a huge mistake. I should have brought a notebook. Taking all those notes because I don't have enough space in my 2 pieces of papers now. So that's great. Thank you so much I really enjoy your lecture. So I mean, being the director for social responsibility of the school, so probably I have to ask a question related to my job, I guess. and what I'm wondering is, when you talk about proactivity relating to future and change, so I wonder, what, in your opinion, what's the role of proactivity in sustainable or pro-environmental employee behavior? Because you talk about in the workplace, right? There are lots of talk about environmental consumer behavior. But in the workplace, so what's the role of proactivity in sustainable employee or green kind of employee behavior, and also helping organization achieving sustainability goals? So that would be my first question. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for the questions. And so we can see that, well, this is from the professions of social responsibility. It's really amazing questions. And well, indeed, I think that for the current organizations, well, many of the organizations nowadays, and well, they will have the environmental protection campaign activities. For example, like, well, the zero carbon campaign, and also a loss of the performance flag, etc. And so, well, it is all about the future-oriented goal of the organization. So, well, if the employees, it also will require the employees to take an initiative to become more proactive in not only reacting, not only performing the proactive behavior in order to fulfill the organizational goal and values in terms of the sustainability goal. But at the same time, we also rely on the employees' creativity, innovativeness to make some new ideas on how they can work together well on protecting the organization, in fulfilling the organization sustainability goal and values. And so it's quite important to have some proactive agent in the organization to work on it.
All right, yeah, thank you. So I guess to take this advice to my personal role, I guess we really need more employee proactive creativity to help us to find the solutions, to help the organization to meet the social responsibility goals and then the zero carbon target. So that's great advice. Thank you. Yeah, if as the facilitator, probably I have a long list of questions, but I probably have ask the next one and then I pass it to the audience. So the next question is, I'm intrigued by the idea that you talk about this congruence between the follower or subordinates and leaders' proactivity. So I think that's a very intriguing idea. What I'm wondering is, what would be your advice to the employees and probably or the leaders if there's a mismatch? So, like for example, if a more proactive employee meets a less proactive leader, so what kind of advice do you have? Let's assume those employees and leaders, they're all competent, of course. Right? I mean, so what would be your advice?
Very interesting questions. Well, if the employees, they are very proactive, but the leader, they are relatively less proactive. And so, well, what is suggestions for the employees? In the employees' point of view, and I was suggesting that, well, probably, and well, they may consider number one is, well, the relationship between the supervisor and themselves. And then, well, they may consider that, well, whether they can try to tell honestly to the leaders that, well, why would they have to become more proactive, etc., etc. And then another recent research also saying that, well, besides that, we can also consider to do some the skill level voice behaviors. And say, for example, like if you really will want to do something good to the organization, to the team, and then if the leader themselves, well, they may not be so proactive. And we can also try to have the skip level voice behavior. We are not saying that with not with respect to your direct supervisor. We just will want to do something to improve the organization. So, well, some of the recent research is saying that the skip level voice behavior may be also one of the ways that we can consider in order, well, to help the organization to improve. I think, well, on the flip side, well, I may also proposing that in another situation, if, well, the leaders are very proactive, but then the subordinates are not very proactive in this situation, so, well, what should we do? As the leader's point of view, and I'm suggesting that, well, we may be more open-minded, and that at the same time, we're giving more training to the employees, so that, well, it's letting them to notice that the organization indeed, well, we're welcoming them to do the productivity. Sometimes the employees, they're not doing the productivity, a lot of different reasons. Maybe, well, due to their, well, relatively less proactive personality, well, the tendency, or because, well, they consider that even though they voice it out, well, and then the organization is not, well, listening to them. So that's why, well, as the leader, and we have to demonstrate, well, to show them that, well, actually the organization is listening to them. And so we're giving them a lot of the very open channel for them to voice out, to do lots of proactive behavior. So this may be one of the suggestions that, well, I can come up to give to both the leader and the subordinates.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think probably the first question I ask is you may make sure that the motive is positive.
Yes.
So, and on the other hand, is we just make the leaders and we need to make the subordinates to be probably more confident, also empower them to be more proactive. Yeah, I think those are great suggestions. So now I think I don't want to take up all the time. So let's see what do I have? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'm John Pantle. I originally was at business school in 1967, but my field was management in organisation development and health and social care. So I was pleased that COVID came up. But COVID really raises, I think, two issues in terms of the issue, the general points you're making. One is that as a service organisation, we've got this problem of the public and the patients who actually will have different views on what they seek. And at the moment, certainly in the UK, many of the public still believe that it should be returned to the, adding the word, old normal. They think the world's going to change and exactly proactive managers can do a lot of things. But in the NHS, I'm a public governor now of our local foundation trust in Stockport. How do we convince the public? We've got some proactive managers, but how do we convince the public? I think then the other issue, perhaps in thinking of certain types of organisations, we have the problem of different professions and professional boundaries, and that gets in the way of the sort of teamwork and collaboration. It's perhaps a little bit less, but still certainly also in local government. I was a member for 42 years on council. We have silos, and some where the silos are dressed up with with professional issues, it gets more difficult to operate in the way. But I hope there will be some research on proactivity in health and social care. And I think Korea and Hong Kong are probably the two places, because Korea had the experience from the Middle East respiratory symptom MERS, and Hong Kong, of course, SARS. And so I know a bit about Korea, although we did have at the business school, we did have some Chevening fellows from the Hong Kong Hospital Authority, and I did manage to get one visit there. But they should be learning. And I'll just add the other final words, evidence-based. How far is it important for leaders and proactive leaders to have an evidence base? But thank you, lots of ideas. I've got to do takeaway points.
Yeah, well, thank you for your questions. And indeed, The issue about productivity in the healthcare service is for increasing in the size of the publication. And for especially recently, a lot of the research is talking about the patient and the doctor, or even the relative, the family of the patient's relationship in the hospitality, in the hospital context. And then some of the research is saying that productivity is really a big matter, important matter in driving not only the relationship with the patient, but also importantly with the family member of the patient.
Yeah.
Because some of the issue is that, in the past, we're just talking about the doctor, the patient relationship, but largely, and we also need to take care about the well-being of the family member of the patient. So that's why I can see that it's getting more and more researchers on this. And the PowerPoint file, yeah. The first research about whether the proactive personality or the employee's productivity doesn't matter in the COVID-19 that's recently published. And then this research is about, at the time of Wuhan last year, 2020, at the time that the pandemic happened. And so how the doctor will take an initiative role in order to overcome all the difficulty, in the hospital in China. It's not only, on the patient relationship, but then also taking into consideration about the future-oriented, the policy implementation, etc. So we can see there's already getting a lot of more and more evidence on this area. And it's not only on organizational psychology, but also on the strategic management, international business research is showing that the importance of having the proactive leader in driving, the organization, the hospital policy implementation, and some new policies as well.
Yeah, that's excellent. I want to avoid. Yeah, excellent questions and answers. What I want to add here is things like what you said is it's particularly important during crisis, like proactivity, like during the COVID-19 Wuhan. And then also I experienced all those in the school as well. A lot of our colleagues and the leaders have been very proactive in setting up like drop-in sessions, set up team channels, just very proactively trying to solve any unforeseeable kind of problems. So proactivity seems to be really, really important during crisis. And also your idea about the fit. So it's like a doctor and patient, the kind of proactivity congruence seems to be also relevant in your healthcare context. Yes, so yes, a question, gentlemen. Yeah.
Sorry, surely by definition on your presentation, which was excellent, the response to COVID-19 was reactionary and not proactive. I think what's been demonstrated over the last 2 years is that there was no proactivity towards COVID-19. We've already mentioned the diseases, and we know those exist, but there was no proactivity. That's the irony. It was all reactivity.
Yes, exactly. And so there's a lot of the debate in saying that we're actually, whether during the crisis, for example, like the pandemic period, and whether proactivity will help or harm the situation. And some of the situation, some of the context, some of the research found that indeed it really helps. And say, for example, like the building up the relationship with the patient is what we call the congruence relationship. But at the same time, many people saying that because with the doctors and also the policymaker, they have to focusing on the in-role performance, the crisis that happening during the pandemic period. And so they may not have the extra resources and time to do the proactivity. And then, even though if they do not have resources and time to do the in-role performance. So to what extent that we can talk about proactivities. So that's why still a lot of the debate that we have to look into and to explore. But one key factor is, we have to be wise proactivity. We are not saying that doing well, we're not saying that doing more is good, but we have to do it wisely, in a more wise way.
At the right time.
Yeah,
do
in the
it
right
in the
time.
right way. That's yes, please.
Yeah, a question on reward systems and motivation. When you come in a corporate culture, you have individual motivation and reward systems, and then you have team reward. So, is there any research or thought on what works better, like a team-based proactivity, or whether individual proactivity is an individual reward system, what impact they actually have?
Yeah, thank you so much. And well, I will address this issue into two parts. The first one is about, by definition, and we are not, particularly need to link proactivities to reward system, because we are assuming that, the proactive is from the self-initiators, and then it may not be necessarily linked to the reward system. But we are not saying that, we are not encouraging the organization to reward some of the good behavior, proactive behavior to the employees, because we can see that still, some of the benefit if, during the performance appraisal, and then we also recognize, the subordinate proactivities. And then also, the first one is it may not be necessarily linked to the reward system. But then if it does, and whether the individual or the team reward system will be more beneficial to the performance of the employees or to the team, and the answer is it depends, because it depends on different contexts, it depends on different industry, and it also depends on different climate of the team. Say, for example, like in some of the climate, the team climate, they pursue for more individual performance, such as for the insurance company, and then for the more pursue and expect the agents, the sales agents, to have a more individual performance. So in this type of the climate, we are expecting them and suggesting them, they may have a more percentage on the individual productivity reward. But for some other contexts like IT or marketing team, and they are working as the team basis, and we are suggesting that probably it may be more relevant or appropriate to use the team-based reward system.
Yeah, thank you. Let's move on to online audience. Sorry, we'll come back later. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, great. So we've had a lot of questions come through online, and a lot of the answers have been covered by these questions. We do have one from Grace Holland, who's asked, how would you support a team where proactivity varies between team members, which may cause conflict?
Yeah, it's very, very interesting with such questions. And thank you so much for the questions from the audience. And this is also one of my new research projects recently. And to what extent and how the team will work better if we have some different level of team the individual proactivity within the same team. And that according to the research findings, in that we found that actually it works better if we have some of the employees, they are proactive, but some of them may not. But it doesn't mean that they necessarily need to be reactive. But then because they're covering up different work content, different work and different work tasks, and so that's why probably it may be the best. But then again, it's very debatable, because we think of a situation. If all the employees are very, very proactive, and then what happened? Meeting never ends. And then they have lots of the brainstorming idea, but never execute. And so that's why in this situation may not be the ideal case. And then of course, and if some are relatively proactive and some are less relatively proactive, or maybe they're the one who will be good at executing the policy and also the idea, and at the same time may have a higher level of the team cohesion, more harmony climate within the team.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yes, thanks, Ashwin. Very interesting stuff. I'm just wondering, how far can you learn to be proactive? You mentioned proactive having a proactive personality. So that sounds to me a little bit like you are or you are not. So in how far can you actually, learn to become proactive? Or let's say you don't have a proactive personality. If you then acted in a proactive manner, would that be perceived as, let's say, genuine? I'm thinking along the lines of sort of surface acting versus deep acting. I mean, is there any research about that?
Yes, well, thank you so much for your questions. Very interesting questions as well. Indeed, well, in terms of the work productivities, well, there are two components. And we can see that, well, one part maybe as what we call nature. And that was more related to the inborn factor, like, well, the proactive personality. Some of the people, well, they're very proactive, have some inborn characteristic. And so very likely that, well, they have the tendency to do the proactive work. But then, well, a large part of it could be nurtures. And so, well, they can be trained it, and well, they can learn it, not necessary to have, well, the lecture or the training courses. Sometimes we can learn from observation. We can learn from social world context. We can learn from peers. And recently, I also worked on one of the researches about, well, the social learning effects on productivity. Sometimes, well, if we can observe your team members voicing out, and then, well, they're trying to criticize the organization. So whether we are going to join in the discussion, so again, it's about a matter of social learning. And of course, we also need to consider to evaluate, well, the cost, the specific cost if you are joining in to criticize the organization or to making some positive suggestions to the organization. So, well, social learning is again, well, a very, very important factor in driving or nurturing the individual, whether, well, they can become a proactive person or not.
Someone raised hand here. Okay. There was person from the. All right. So yeah, I think I want to add to that. It's a very interesting question about nurturing. Is I think also create a very psychological safe environment is quite important. That kind of environment will facilitate the social learning that you mentioned earlier. So that's very important. I think we might have do we have a question from the audience now?
Yeah, I mean we've got one more that's just coming from Nancy on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Is there a correlation between employee proactivity and employee productivity?
Employee productivity and productivity. Yes, well, thank you so much for the questions. Indeed, well, there is quite a strong relationship between, well, the employees' proactivities and, well, productivity. It's not only in the individual level. We can see that, well, indeed, if the employees, they're very proactive, it's very good, well, for them because, well, they can have a career development, they can have, well, the increase in their salary, they can have a more promotion opportunity, etc. But at the same time, well, it can also increase in their productivity. And well, not in the individual basis, but also at the team level. Because sometimes, well, again, we're about, well, social learning. If you can see that, well, your peers quite proactive and helping the organization to improve. And if you are a proactive person, then probably you may also be facilitated. It's about a kind of the social facilitation for effects to facilitate you, to driving you to do more proactive things in order to help an organization to improve. And so, well, it does really have a very strong relationship. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If not, I think we are spot on in timing. So, Fiona, you wanna pass to Fiona to
say a few words.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much, Wing, for your presentation. As quite a few of you have already indicated, there's a lot of food for thought in there. So I was just thinking I'm going to be asking over a drink about the relationship between kind of say people looking at it from your perspective of organisational psychology, but then also thinking about scholars working in the field of innovation and what are the conversations that might happen across those subdisciplines in terms of some of the things that you were talking about there. And then the other issue I was thinking about in terms of the organisational context in which these sorts of things are supported and facilitated, where you often hear in, say, small and medium organisations when they're starting up, there's lots of energy, people have to work across different fields, so they're all being proactive. But how do you achieve that and facilitate it in a very well-established organisation which has lots of rules and regulations and actually might dampen innovation? And supposedly, my colleagues in innovation, I've learned from them about end user innovation and how you kind of from the bottom up as well, always be thinking about how you create the conditions in which people's good ideas on the ground at every level is being fed up and open, people are open to that, like leaders. So I think there's a lot of things I was thinking about there in terms of your talk. So it's just great to have your insights. I know you've not had the opportunity to share about how you do all this research in terms of your own, methodologies and work within organisational psychology, but of the papers I've seen, some very detailed work that goes on there. So thank you to colleagues here, questions here, and also on our online audiences for your insightful questions as well. Now we're going to be continuing the series. So the next one of these inaugural lectures is on the 27th of April, so just under a month, where we're going to hear from Michael Hodson, who is a professor of Cities Innovation Society in the Sustainable Consumption Institute here in the Business School. The Institute is a cross school, so with ourselves and the School of Social Science, and indeed Mike has a very large grant from the SRC where he has been working on issues to do with cities and innovation. So I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting discussion there. And there will be a link, seamless link from some of the things that you've been making us think about today, Wing, onto the topic in a month from now. So thanks very much to everybody. And thank you to Hongwei for facilitating this discussion, but especially to Wing for her presentation, and congratulations on her professorship again. Thank you.